Right, hi everyone. I think we just have to wait a few moments while people filter in from the waiting room. Just take a few more moments while people can see the numbers are going up, which is always a very good sign. But thank you to everyone for joining us. Yeah, gosh, the numbers are going up. I'm not very good at small talk, so I think that should be enough time for everyone to get joining. So let's make a start. We're already a few minutes late, and I know we've got a lot to get through. So hello everyone, my name is Hannah Crouch and I'm the editor at Digital Health. Thank you to everyone for joining us for today's webinar, which is going to be putting the spotlight on Barnsley Hospital NHS Foundation Trust and Walsall Healthcare NHS Trust, which both went live with System C's Careflow EPR during the first coronavirus lockdown, which is much more than I did during the lockdown. We've got a great panel today with speakers from both Barnsley and Walsall. So in the Barnsley corner, we have Tom Davidson, Director of ICT, Dominic Villas, the CCIO, and Richard Billam, who's the Programme Manager. And from Walsall, we have Keith Dibble, EPR Programme Manager, Mark Harrison, Programme Manager. We were meant to have Julia Smith, the Training Manager, but she is unfortunately busy doing some other very important stuff with the vaccinations, so she won't be joining us today, sadly. But I'm sure the others will do more than enough to kind of fill up this time as well. So after their presentations, and yes, that's correct, we've got 5 of them, we're going to have a Q&A session where the listeners can put your questions to our panel. A quick reminder for anyone who does have questions that you can ask them at any point during the webinar. The best way to do this is in the Q&A section. It's really easy and simple, and it makes them really visible for me when it comes to answering asking the questions, sorry. So yeah, please use the Q&A section. It's along the bottom where you can mute yourself and turn your cameras on usually, so that's where you can find it. And we also have a very fancy community voting system, so you can all see the questions that are being submitted and there'll be a little thumb next to it, and if you like the look of the question, give it a thumbs up, and what it does is it bumps up the list and makes it more visible for me to see. So please do make the most of both the Q&A section and the community vote. I'm now going to stop talking, I promise, and I'm going to hand over to our first speaker from Barnsley, which I believe is Tom. So Tom, it's over to you.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm Tom Davidson, the Director of ICT for Barnsley Hospital, and I hope you can all see my screen okay. I've got a presentation which will help with the flow. See if I can actually operate the screen. There we go. Right. What am I going to do today? So really this is about what we're doing as an organisation and why we made the decisions that we did around 2 firsts as far as we're concerned. The first one being moving away from the national programme Lorenzo onto Medway System C, which was a big leap for us. And it was, we delivered an EPR replacement, one of the most challenging things IT can do. And we did it during unprecedented times. So it's very, I think we're in a really amazing space in terms of what we've done. And this presentation is about not only why we did it, but how we did it. And hopefully, you can agree with us that actually, in terms of the future, this is the way we're going to operate moving forwards. So without further ado, very busy slide, just shows you all the things that IT get on. I mean, I'm going to be motoring through this presentation because I don't have that long, but all the busy things that ICT get on with, along everything else, as well as delivering EPR. So it's a very, very busy program to try and get the organisation, which is in a very difficult space, up to modern standards. This is kind of our outline in terms of what we plan to do around replacing Lorenzo with EPR, all the people we had to talk to, all the engagement, all the standard things that people do when they replace EPRs in terms of engagement, configuration workshops, sectors of individuals we had to build groups for, etc., etc. And then our ongoing work and plans to put in scanning solutions and the electronic document management solutions and onto electronic prescribing, which is our next planned step after this one. And hopefully we'll get to order comms and results reporting. I'm just going to note that little comment at the bottom of this first slide. When we asked our staff if they, even though moving away from Lorenzo would involve a lot of extra work for everybody, 95% chose yes. So, you know, I thought that was a really good start for our program. It gave you a level of engagement. Sorry, was that somebody?
Yeah.
No, okay, I'll continue. So the first question was...
I'm going to, if you give me 2 seconds, I'm going to ask Keith to do the thing for me.
Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on there. Anyway, the first one was, why did we pause? So I think everyone knows why we pause. You can see that little bit of activity going there. You know, in terms of forecasting, in terms of number of COVID patients in our beds, you could see them. There was a forecast of going straight up. You know, at the time, you know, we were planning to go live in the next month. It was quite clear that if we carried on that trajectory, we'd been in a complete and utter mess, and it would have been a total disaster. So I think it was absolutely the right idea. Why did we pause? And we got on with other things around the COVID-19 response. So we've been massively busy around doing the virtual video conferencing, the virtual clinics, the kits, the dashboards, and home working. So masses of work, and it's a good job we did that because it set us up for the next step. And why did we restart? So this shows you where we made the decision to restart and then the go live. So you can see we were right well over the curve. We're well on the way down again. We expected to be fairly quiet when we went live, and actually we made the right decision. We knew we could pause at any time, again, if we had to. So we decided to go ahead with it. And it's a really good job we did, because it's really helped us operationally to refresh everything, refresh everybody's thinking, get them on in understanding patient flow across the organisation with electronic systems, etc. Because we hit the highest bed occupancy of COVID in the UK in around the November period. So we're incredibly busy, and actually all the work we did really helped out because everyone really understood the solutions well. A bit more detail around the start. So, you know, we had real support from the trust as a whole. Everyone was really keen to go ahead with Medway. We had lots of low activity in certain areas because we just had to shut things down, as I'm sure you all did as well. We wanted to avoid winter pressures or worries of holidays and everything else. So we decided, right, let's go for it. We are ready. We did an awful lot of training before, and actually, you know, we could use the technology we was using around video conferencing to step in that gap. So I'm going to pass over to Richard at this point. Richard Billam, my program manager. He'll be able to pick up more detail on the how.
Do you want to pop the next slide on, Tom?
Sure.
So we what I want to talk through is some of the elements around doing specifically around the remote deployment. So as Tom mentioned there, we were about to go live. We were about 2 weeks away from going live when we put the project on hold. So we'd already completed a first go live test, and one of the benefits that we got there was that we got an opportunity to do another one. So the first one very much focused on testing the actual solution, so all the technicalities of actually going live. And then the second one was really about focusing purely on the remote activities. Because this has never been done before, that was always our top risk going back into redeployment. We had an 8-week plan, so we retrained people again, but we had a really clear plan of how to execute that. So we really did benefit from having that extra go live test. And it forced us to think differently. So we'd already picked up a lot of things from the first go live about how we would reorganize ourselves for the actual go live, in terms of how we managed issues, communicated, and particularly things about people in the room. So in the go live test, there's probably about a half of the number of people that we'd be using at go live, because we would typically have all the supplier resource on site as well. So we were thinking about how we get people in and out of the building. And we had to rethink that again, obviously, for going live with a remote deployment. So things we thought about was how you communicate, how you share information, escalation of issues, and just some basics about splitting people up into different locations. So we had some people at home, some people in the main project office, and then other people were working remotely, but they were in their offices in the trust. So if we had any comms issues or anything like that, we'd still be able to proceed. So in terms of preparing the teams, we obviously had to get people up to speed on how to use Teams. So the main thing that came out of our first dress rehearsal was that people outside of the project team didn't actually know how to use Teams that well. So they'd been working on it. It's just that same slide, Tom. There you go. They'd not actually used Teams that a lot. They'd done some video calls, and Teams is much more than that. So we did a lot of work. My project team did a lot of work on getting people up to speed on that and making sure that they could use Teams effectively. We also ran separate meetings with all the different groups of people. So those that were doing data validation, touch testing, that type of activity, we had separate meetings with them to talk through how this would work for them. So they'd have a pack to complete, show them where it was, what they needed to do some tests around that. And we ran those multiple sessions at multiple times, again, all over Teams, just to make sure that people could get on. And it's, some basics around making sure people got the correct setup. So they had a laptop with a microphone and a camera, and all the basics on getting people working. So in terms of equipping people, as I said, Teams is much more than video conferencing. It's really about collaboration. So we made sure that all our documentation was held on Teams, and all our comms moved to having links to those documents so that everybody could access them when they needed to. We stopped sending out attachments because we know that they could get old and stale. And we kept all our documents live right up to the point of go live. So we were amending them right the way through to make sure that they reflected the latest information. And that was a key thing for us, is we opened up everything. So all of our team site for the Medway project was open to everybody on the project and all the people around the trust who were involved in the deployment as well. So we ran out 3 key documents for this. We had an overall cutover plan, and again, everything in there was linked to further documents on Teams. The management briefing pack ended up just being 2 sides of A4, again with live links to live documents on Teams, and then we had those detailed packs for testers, etc. So some of the things that we did around Teams, so you can see there on the screen, we've got our Medway PAS team, and we created lots of channels. So when we did our test of Go Live, there was a lot of feedback about having too many channels, and there was a real push to reduce that. We actually kept them, and in some cases increased them. And the reason we did that was that actually the issues people were having was just a training around Teams. So keeping those channels, having multiple channels, allowed us to keep the conversation around a specific activity. So you've got a maternity or ED or things like that. So it was relevant for everybody who was communicating in those channels. And we also used tags. So we had a tag of GL issue. So if anybody identified an issue that affected Go Live and needed urgent response, then we tagged that message with that, and we could use Teams then to track them, make sure that they're all picked up and responded to as well. And we also pinned things to our team. So we've got the rota there, which was everybody wanted to know what they were doing in terms of floor walking and what their responsibilities were. And we also pinned the Go Live issues tracker there as well. So everybody could have direct access to that whenever they went into the team. And another feedback from the first test was that people didn't like the meetings being arranged in Teams. They wanted all the meetings, the planned meetings, to be in Outlook. So we used to send out Outlook meeting requests, which has proved to be beneficial in terms of getting people on time as well. And the final thing on equipping teams is actually making sure your supplier is part of your team. So all of System C, who are part of the deployment, were using our team site. So there was no issues with communications or sharing files or anything like that. In terms of looking at how you do this, then remove any rigid processes. So we just went at everything that we could think of. Anything that was complicated, required direct interaction, personal interaction, we just simplified it down to be a process, or removed it if it wasn't required. I've already mentioned about keeping the comms channels open. They were wide open in terms of making sure everybody had access to everything. In terms of simplifying support, we had a really, really simple model. The ward level would speak to their super user, who would speak to their floor walker, into the project team, and then escalate to System C as the supplier. We had a really clear, no direct contact with System C apart from the project team. And that actually took away a lot of the noise that we saw as part of the go live tests. And it actually provided much more responsive issue resolution for people on wards, because they were getting support from people who understood their processes from their super users, so they knew exactly what they were trying to achieve. And that floor walking resource proved invaluable as well. We logged all our issues on a spreadsheet, which everybody had access to so they could see, and then we used the supplier's JIRA system to actually collate all the big issues and anything that needed moving along, in a more formal way. In terms of floor walking, so this is the bit that everybody remembers, and it's the bit that really paid off for us. So we didn't use any. We only used Trust Resource for floor walking, and I think that was a huge benefit to us, not just at go live, but also afterwards, because we've still got all those people around and they're all helping with Medway now. There's about 25, 30 people providing 24-hour support over the 4-week period. Everything was logged through Teams, so we didn't run a service desk with telephones and email support and things like that. We did it all through Teams. And when we got to, actually going live, that super user resource that we had interaction with really proved beneficial. And in terms of ED, our ED went live first in the early hours of the morning, and we didn't overflow them with people. We had people around, and they had direct access to the rest of the project team if they needed additional support. And when issues were identified, we could quite quickly collate people from all around the hospital and get them together in certain areas. So that rapid communication is the key thing that really paid off for us in terms of go live. So that's how we utilised Teams and did the remote deployment. Over to you, Tom.
Okay. So why was this a success? We did it. We got full local ownership. Our staff were really pleased with the new solution. We've been welcomed by the clinical teams. And that's the point. I've never seen the clinical teams being as friendly as they were to the ICT team. Really pleased that we were there and had to help them out where we were. Very quick and easy and responsive access to us at all times, and that made it a phenomenal difference to them. And the other main point is obviously no comments were emailed to our CEO. Our chief exec is very keen that everyone has full access to him, and he receives emails about all sorts of things all the time. And it's his kind of way of measuring, how the organisation is feeling as a whole about something. And he was really pleased that actually, we didn't get any negative comments on that basis. Obviously, what does this mean for our staff? Obviously, we went through all the same pain as you normally do for an EPR, which is the learning, the anxiety, the disruption. And it was really interesting. We did have some anxiety, but none of the kind of the real anxious tear moments that you sometimes see with ICT programs. So I think, that's why we believe this is the best way to help deliver major data transformations into the future. Why am I showing you this picture? So this is about kind of how we felt just before the go live. So if you can imagine, this is a scenario where you've got these high ropes, and you leap off here using this attached rope, and you drop all the way to the floor, like a bit like a parachute. And the closer you get to the floor, the slower the rope gets. But actually, when you take this leap of faith off the top here, absolutely, you don't know where it's going to go. It feels like free falling. what I'm seeing about this is what the EPR program felt a bit like this. We're doing brand new things we'd never done before. And because of that anxiety in our heads, it felt really scary. But the second point was, this was very, very safe. You know, you had all the right equipment on, we were all ready and prepared. Everyone knew what they were doing. We were all lined up. And that was around the organisation that came with the collaboration. I think that was kind of the point I'm trying to make here. Even though it felt risky, it really was worthwhile us moving forwards. Lots of things that we learned. So obviously the collaboration tools were brilliant, and it was really interesting. The supplier off-site, there was some great relationships set up, and it was really important we did so. So important that the ICT team were very reactive to all the issues that cropped up, and they worked amongst themselves in a collaborative way to make sure we covered things. You know, what really was great, we didn't get duplication. So you didn't get 3 people going to the same issue. They kind of managed it between them and they farmed themselves around. It was so good to see. And being able to be there, watching the messages come through, and offering advice immediately when people were getting stuck, etc., was really, really valuable. So it was so visible to see where people were and what they were doing. When people flagged issues, you know, where's the floor walkers, they all said, oh, I'm here, and you knew exactly where they were. So it was such a good way to move forwards. And I mean, I think that point in yellow that I make at the bottom there, we were worried that you know, the work that we need to do around the implementation of Medway would make us ready if COVID-19 would strike again. And you know, it was it happened, and we were ready for it much more than we thought we'd ever would be. So you know, that's really pleasing. So I'm going to leave it there, and so we can pass on to our colleagues. If I can stop the share at that point, and you can hear from Walsall.
Lovely, thanks so much, Tom. We're now going to do the very hopefully swift handover to the Team Walsall team. So I think we're just going to get up the next slides, and then Keith, it's over to you.
Thank you very much. Once the technology starts, and then Mark and I kind of do a double act around this. So thank you very much. That's just us. We're very pleased with our logo, by the way. That's something we had a competition for, and a member of staff won a voucher provided by System C, I should have to say, for the design. So we're very pleased with that, but that's an aside. So can I go to the next slide, please? So that's just us. I'm the program director, as I've mentioned before. Mark is the program manager. Julia, who should have been joining us, is otherwise engaged. But what I would stress just briefly on this one is that we work very much as a multi-professional digital team, from the experts in programming, in the technological side of things, and data migration, through training, et cetera, but also as part of a wider team where we had good clinical engagement. And I'll come on to that in a bit more detail in a second. But that operational input was absolutely critical. So we were pretty key. This was not a digital application. This was actually a whole service transformation initiative. Next slide, please. So just so a bit like Barnsley, we weren't just replacing a PAS, we were taking on other initiatives as well. So we had a new theatre system, our vitals were upgraded, and we've been expanding that into our emergency department. And we also took on the Care Flow Collect module, which is the, as I lovingly call it, a mobile communication for WhatsApp for doctors. But that, just to give you the breadth of the program that we were going on, and a bit like Barnsley, this is part of our digital journey. I think we were probably at an earlier stage than Barnsley. We were starting from quite a low point, but we have a lot of now very strong initiatives on the back of the Medway program, including electronic document management, EPMA, patient flow, etc. And the next slide, please. Key data, just I suppose, just to give a bit of a flavour of what we were trying to achieve. We came from a standing start for a whole variety of reasons, which I won't bore you with. We didn't get final sign-off from our trust board to March 2019, and we actually commenced the following months. I came into post on the 1st of April, and Mark joined the team about 6 weeks later. So we were, and then other people joined the team, project managers and like, during the year. So we had quite a tight time scale, and our target go live originally was the end of March 2020, with the Lorenzo contract, the burning bridge, if you like, Lorenzo coming out of operation in February. So we had some overlap to deal with. We did actually did our original go live by 1 month due to some technical issues, but only to the end of April. And then we had a subsequent second deferral for reasons you'll appreciate, to September because of the COVID situation. And we reviewed that decision at the end of June. We then got the full confirmation from the board that we should go live in mid-September as indicated there. So, and the next slide, please. So that was our our EPR journey that we laid out through the whole year. This was something that we communicated widely to the organisation. We did it visually, and you won't see this on the screen particularly clearly, but actually we had this on a wall. Before the situation when we actually had people walking up and down corridors in hospitals, we had this in a very visual way on a wall by our main coster. And the important part of that was actually to get people to understand where they fitted into the various parts of the programme. What we didn't want people to see is just their section in isolation. And it was important they knew when testing was going on, whether they were involved in that, when the training was going to be scheduled, etc. And so we laid it out throughout that and made it clear so that our communication process, which was fundamental part of our programme, was all built around this whole pictorial process, which we gave very clear messages to just frontline staff. And the next one, please. So that's obviously what happened. And if I move quickly to the next slide as well, please. And obviously, in one sense, very pictorially, that's what happened to our programme. And it felt a bit like that at the time of burning platform, what the hell do we do next? So we were faced with a number of choices. And if we can move on to the next slide as well, please. I'm going to ask Mark to talk about that, and I'll come back and join you back in a second.
Thank you, Keith. So as you saw on the previous slide, our original plan is just going up in flames. But where were we at that stage? Now, we just completed UAT2. We commenced training. We were 2 weeks in. We started on our dress rehearsal planning stage to get everything ready. Our data migration was on track, and our BI reporting was in flow. Now, with all them tasks going off, as Barnsley had explained when they were going through it, was that everything completely changed. We did a complete stop of every single piece of work that we were doing on the EPR programme, and then moved on to COVID. And our training team and everything was then completely caught up with everything else other than the EPR. So next slide, please. So of the few months that we had of COVID, we had the challenges then regarding our go live. We had operational fatigue. All our staff had leave postponed because of the go live in the early part of the year. We then had the COVID, which was long days and long nights for lots of people, both clinical and non-clinical people. The ability to try and take leave then became very difficult to do. We then started with the second spike of COVID, which was we were being told was just going to be coming around the corner. We had winter pressures, which was going to be there as well. And then if you take all of that and try to put that into one melting pot, we had staff so drained, and then it's the ability of the staff then and willingness to engage back in with the programme on a major transformation. Now, as we all know, people can feel that we are doing it to them and they're not part of it. And one of the things that we did from the start of our programme was to have a joint approach, and the risk of doing it to the organisation we mitigated as best we could, even though it was difficult to do so in the very trying environments. But because we were being led by the clinicians, it helped to negate that risk of doing it to them, and they felt it was more of a partnership. COVID then started to ease off, and we then needed to restart the program itself and get back up to speed in a very, very quick way. And as you all know, if you think of it as the tanker analogy, to stop takes several miles, and then to start back up again, it does take a while. However, with working with the organisation and the willingness of our staff, we was then able then to say, we can move at pace of doing this, but we engaged with our clinicians and took their view, and they used the analogy of, we need to rip the plaster off. We need to get it in while we have still got this lull between COVID-1 and COVID-2 and the winter pressures. And that really did help with change of mindset. And we had to do all of this through a virtual world of doing virtual clinics, virtual testing, virtual team meetings to deal with processes, etc. So it was a complete way of working that never ever worked before. Next slide, please. So how can we then achieve our go live? So we had to look at the key strands of all of this. Training. We've always been used to doing classroom face-to-face and have that engagement with our end users to give them the ability to ask questions, and for us then to contextualize it how and where they sit in the process. Within weeks, we had to come up with a completely different solution, and we had to then keep in the context of how COVID would be very difficult to get people in, to make people feel safe. So we then took it to an online learning using Articulate and a product called Moodle, where we designed the videos, the talk-throughs at a really, really fast pace, and the assessments, so they could then do the training whilst in work, whilst at home, or in fact in any way they could connect to the internet, and that would then be able to do that. We had to completely relook at our testing. What had we got done? What do we need to do? We had fixes coming in from System C. We had to replan all of that work to ensure that we could get operational sign-off, but also the ability to keep people safe. The cutover, and thank you to Barnsley for this because they did it first, the ability to plan and do a cutover in a virtual environment. It's quite daunting when you think you have all your supply, your staff, etc., all on the shop floor to deliver this, and then we had to take a step back and do it like we had a room full of screens and talking to people. We had to relaunch our communications and how we would engage with people. We also had to ensure that as part of the engagement process, we were very clear that patient safety is paramount across everything of keeping your patient safe, your staff safe, your external suppliers, if they were to come on site, keeping them safe. So it was a complete minefield of how to get that right message out, make sure that message was effective, but also build that engagement and belief back up. The EPR was at the back of everyone's mind because COVID was the most important thing in the world to them. Now, we, with our engagement staff, we were able to redo that and get the trust to start thinking. We had to have different ways of engaging with the operational staff so that they could then be more engaging with us and not impeding their day-to-day activity. We also have the dilemma of how do we re-energize our own staff? Because for over a year, we've been working at a fast pace to deliver a product and being as diligent as we can be. But also, as I said earlier, is we stopped it, dealt with the COVID, brought in everything that we need to do to deliver the COVID support effectively, and then getting the staff to think, right, we can now do this and do it and ensure we could go live. And as all good projects should do, you always have a plan B. And that on this occasion, we didn't have a plan B. We only had a single opportunity to get it in before COVID-2 could strike. Next slide, please. As I mentioned before, the clinical and the operation engagement, we have been really fortunate throughout the project, where we set up initially a design authority group, which then was so important to us as we got further on down the line. And their support cannot be underestimated. And having the CCIOs, divisional CCIOs, consultants, junior doctors, also allied health professionals, all a part of that group made our support of going live so different, to ensure that we had the buy-in from strategic level, from the shop floor level, and we were able to do that. We were very conscious that we had to clearly identify what we must do and what the implications of not doing it would be, and what could we defer. As you all know, that if you can't get 100 things right, you're going to get 98% right. And the two things that you need to do, you need a very, very clear plan to do what we needed to do post go live. And because we engaged with across all of the business, and this is where the key support comes from, is by saying what we could achieve and what we couldn't, and then giving them a timeline afterwards. It kind of like made it for them realistic. It also made sure that it wasn't being done to them, it was being done with them. And that was key. And we also said that by talking with people and ensuring that we kept them up to date, you know, you're drip feeding the information at a pace that they are able then to digest, and then also to then feed that back to us, was also key in moving this forward with the engagement. Next slide, please. So the technical aspects and the cutover elements, because we'd stopped and we all needed to ensure that we had the new ways of working. You will all be well aware that the education centre was buying up hardware, and other NHS organisations were buying hardware at the same time, so that we could successfully work in a new way of working. How did we deal with the hardware shortages that we were starting to find through a procurement route, and moving them around, the new ways of working, as I mentioned, on the training? How do we do all that? And that was purely only by re-engagement with staff and ensuring both technically they had the equipment to do what we were being asked of them, but also ensuring it was fit for purpose. Now, as part of our testing of where we'd done it through at the start of the project, and any delays that we had, we were fairly comfortable with our data migration. We'd done 30, 40 iterations of the data migration, taking it through, working through and saying, have we got the clinic set up? Have we catered for X, catered for Y? And it proved when we went live, we had 100% success rate in our data migration. During the normal UAT style of testing, where we had delays and we had to replan early on in the program because of technical issues, we then introduced what we called user process validation and business process validation. And there were just it was just a variation on the types of testing that we had. And one of the things that it did show us was that we absolutely tested the product to the nth degree, which gave confidence to our users and also to the team that what we were going to be putting out there was successfully tested and is appropriate for the business. Now, we had to get all of this lot signed off, and that was not the easiest part to do. I would probably say it was one of the difficult areas, and that was only down to staff availability. So we had to think of a new way of normally doing this. We would sit down with them and try to do workshops, but we ended up having to do a lot of this over Teams and stepping people through, but also by doing the user process validation and the business process validation earlier on, it was able to give the operational leads confidence of the way we tested it and walking them through their processes. Next slide, please. So as we came closer and closer to the go live and the cutover, there was also the necessity when you do your dress rehearsals, your critical fixes that had to be put in. And I must say, by working closely with System C staff, we were able then to get the fixes through at the agreed times, but also we were able to communicate that back to the business. And this is where for us communication was the most paramount of the program itself, was keeping them informed at the right level and at the right times to give them the assurance. And then also we have every organisation has your clinical safety officer. But one of the things that we found through other deployments is that by having our clinical safety officer involved throughout, and also being a key member of the design authority group, our CSO was able then to clinically sign off all of the assessments that we'd done at a faster pace than what we would normally have done previously. Community for us is a key element. We have a large community, so we was keen to ensure that we kept them on board. It's a new way of working, so the DR and the business continuity plans had to be done, and agreeing what the criteria was then for the business go live. So next slide, please. So on the cutover, we went through, did the dress rehearsal. Ours went fairly well. Very limited issues came out, apart from we seemed to be ahead of time. On the go live itself, we just ensured that we had sufficient floor walkers. And the key thing that I would recommend for any other organisation that is going to go live with a product that has been used in other areas is actually to engage with them. We was fortunate, we engaged with Barnsley, and we had quite a number of their team come down for our go live weekend, and that I cannot say how beneficial it was. Of moving into the post go live period, we did extend our early go live support model to give the business more comfort and talk them through any business problems that we had uncovered, and we uncovered quite a few. But Keith, do you want me to do the training approach? You're on mute.
Mute. Sorry, next slide, please. And I'll conscious of time, so we'll get through this quite quickly. So just very quickly, we went straight, as Mark has indicated, from a classroom situation into a virtual training process. We had tested it in a very minor way during the downtime, if you like, before we restarted the programme. So some training had been sorted out through what was a Moodle software. But what we had to do was ensure that we were trying to train somewhere around 2,500 staff. And we had to do that all virtually via that Moodle software, as I mentioned. And that meant a number of things to do in terms of communication for that, the engagement, how people could do it, and the sign up for people to actually take the responsibility for it. Because when you have people go into classroom situations, they log in, they sit down, they do an assessment at the end, and they walk out having been signed off. That responsibility passes entirely to the individual once you go virtual. We supported all that with quick reference guides to make sure that people had that sort of information at their fingertips. So when they turned on the machine on the go live date, they knew what they had to do in a very quick way. I'm conscious that's a very quick canter through, but I have the next slide, please. So there were just 3 challenges, I think, that I just wanted to highlight. Really, we had to actually take our training team, who were trained and have been born and bred into a classroom process, to actually become online creators. So they had to actually create the training modules. They had to treat them as mini TV sort of situations, if you like, by dictating things very clearly and guiding people through those things. And also change the whole way that they were working. So they had to be really clear on their communication, because there's no room to reaction, obviously, once you start getting into that virtual training process. The timescales, as indicated there, were very, very tight. We would normally want to have done that over several months. We effectively had weeks to do that. And our classroom training program was shortened from 8 weeks to 4 to accommodate that. And I guess the other thing is, Marmite is one of something you either love or you hate, and there's lots of things about virtual training that people don't like. They like a lot of people like the interface between the trainer and the trainee, and we had to maintain that human element. It's really important that we didn't lose out by becoming just a remote set of trainers, and that ongoing support that Mark's already indicated through the cutover process was actually a way of reinforcing that training requirement. And then our final slide, because I'm very conscious of time. We've already mentioned some of those. We had a great support from Barnsley, really good. We learnt a lot from them and also had the physical people on board. The clinical engagement was really crucial. We had clinical leadership. Our programme board was led by our medical director. We had divisional CCIOs involved in the decision-making throughout the whole programme. And we did actually, obviously, go back to something that Tom suggested. We actually, we did achieve what we set out to do, and we have laid the foundations for our digital strategy going forward. There are some learning points. We've still got to refine our virtual working. We did it quickly. We made some mistakes, and we've got to make sure that works more smoothly going forward. And we've also got to make sure that we can support our staff going through what is a constant period of pressure and change associated with COVID. And there are some bits of work we need to do. Service reviews is something we didn't get to the bottom of, and we should have done that in more detail. And we're now embarking that as we go into the new calendar year. And I think our final slide is probably the end, really. So just want to say thank you for your attention and pass you back to Hannah.
Thank you very much, both. Really, really interesting presentations. I'm not going to sort of waste too much time because we've got a lot of questions coming through, which is brilliant. Thank you to everyone who's got their questions in. Tom and Richard, I know you've been answering some of them as they go along, but the one question which Tom has answered, but I just wanted to put to Walsall as well, was about, it's from Arjun, who's talking about how did you manage training, change management, how do you kind of manage that when you're deploying an EPR solution remotely? Tom's very kindly answers saying that Barnsley went live over 3 days, training was booked over Teams and things like that, and change management, was managed through configuration meetings. Was that a similar story at Walsall, either Keith or Mark?
I think in brief, yes. I mean, we had done some of our change management change management processes and instigated them sort of prior to our first deferral. The challenge for us was to restart some of those things and get people thinking again, because I think we got to a point in our process, and our presentation indicated, and had to sort of get people thinking about EPR again, as opposed to something that they've been immersed in for months. So, but the similar answer, yes, that's how we did it. And I guess we're still going through that process. I think the go live was one achievement, but it takes months to embed a system. And, you know, we're a much more comfortable position than we were 6 weeks ago. And in 6 weeks' time, we'll be in a more comfortable position again. And some of those changes that people have gone through will be embedded, and they'll believe that, as opposed to being in that learning process.
One of the things, just to finish that off, one of the things that I've now booked in is that we will then go and do the service review, a full service review across the trust, starting that off then in January, so we can see what has worked, what hasn't, and what changes then we need to pick up and then start to embed before any bad practices can then come back in.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Mark. Another question which I thought was quite interesting. Obviously, COVID and the current circumstances that we've all been going through this year has meant that you had to do this remotely. But going forward, someone's asked if you have the option of doing this again, of going live remotely over kind of the traditional way of everyone on site, which one would you prefer? I'm going to put it to Tom or Richard first, and then I'll ask the Walsall lot.
I'd definitely choose the remote option because it's less chaotic. You know, if you're doing something big like this and you've got 50 people in the room, there's a lot of hot air in that room. It really worked well having everybody available and everybody being able to see everything. I think that's one of the key things. It's one of the questions that was asked about, did System C help your floor workers? Yeah, but they didn't have to go and walk all the floors to find them. They could see all the messages coming in, and were able to respond immediately if that was appropriate, or it would get escalated and they'd do Teams calls. And it's the immediacy of being able to solve something. If somebody's got an issue and you can resolve it in a few seconds, that's so much more powerful than having to wait for somebody to meander across a large building.
I see you nodding your head, Tom.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, it was the ownership it created amongst the ICT team, because obviously having a supplier available with you, you tend to lean on them to do the bit for you, and not pick up that experience and knowledge. If you tackle it yourself and give that a go first yourself as an individual, and obviously use the backing of teams in order to get some pointers, they end up actually delivering the solution themselves and learning that. And that's absolutely valuable for taking forwards.
What about Keith or you, Mark? What do you guys think?
I'll let Keith answer first, and I'll come second.
Thank you, Mark. I think I would support what Tom and Richard have said. I think, and I think going forward, we will, any further future implementation, we will go through a virtual process. What I would say, just as a word of caution, I think there were some frontline staff who found that difficult. Some would have preferred and did prefer to have somebody sitting by their side to talk them through things. And I think the more we do it virtually, the more people will be comfortable with that. And I think it almost goes back to a point Richard made earlier in the presentation. Some people were very comfortable using computers and Teams and all the other things, and some people found that quite a challenge.
I don't disagree with what anyone has said. I also think I'm a little bit old school as well. I would prefer a more blended approach. I think the Teams, the virtual was very, very good, but I also think of having a certain amount of presence is necessary as well.
Thanks so much. Another question we've had through from Samantha. This was asked during Walsall's presentation, so I'm not entirely sure who it's aimed at. So did you run this from a benefits-based deployment? And if so, are you planning to realise these benefits moving forward? I'm going to throw that out there to anyone.
That's a good question. I think we've still got more work to do around the benefits side of things. So we know we've done that. We've had to refine those benefits, of course, as we've gone through a revised process. So more work to be done on that. But the short answer is absolutely yes. We are. That's one of our key tasks over the next 3 to 4 months.
Richard or Tom, do you want to add anything? Or?
Yeah, so absolutely, we needed to have benefits that stack up really well for the business case, and obviously we keep an eye on those as part of our ongoing steering group. You'd imagine that this EPR replacement was part of the whole program, and the benefits were attributable to that whole program of work, the whole transformation, the electronic prescribing elements, the electronic document management and scanning elements. So, it was about, we can only really get full realization of those benefits following the full delivery of the strategy.
Thank you very much, Tom. I'll keep going through because we've got so many questions to get through. Another one is from Zach, who's asking about the people side of the project and what that experience was like for each trust, and what was the key lesson that you each kind of learned from that. Again, I'm not sure who wants to go first, whether Walsall or Barnsley.
Keith, do you want to start? Then I'll come in.
Go on, we're very polite. I'll jump in. I think that's a really good question, because I think it opens up a wider agenda in terms of how you support people working virtually. Some people cope with that very well. Some people perhaps don't. Some people do require the interface and that whole working alone and the self-discipline you need, but also the care of people being able to sort of bounce ideas around and get support from individuals. And that's partly related to the digital team, who were very much working, or a lot of them working from home, but also applied to the operational team, who are a mixed economy. So I do think there's more work to be done on how we care for people. And I guess that made the communication process much more challenging in one sense, although you could also get to people much more easily if people were able to access Teams, etc. I think where it opened up challenges were those staff that perhaps didn't access computers, so nursing staff, frontline staff who probably would not engage naturally, patterns, etc., and how they're used to working, would not engage naturally with that communication process, and therefore I think there is more work to be done to how to work with people as a whole in terms of taking this forward.
From the staff within the programme, I think one of the things that I noticed, and Keith and I implemented quite quickly, was the pastoral care of the staff, because of the pressures not only within the trust for delivering the programme, but the external pressure then that people were starting to feel because of the COVID pandemic, and that was paramount. And it was also for non-clinical people to understand how the clinical people were feeling, and now we then engaged and supported them in doing what we were trying to do, but not interfering with them of doing their day job.
Tom or Richard, do you want to jump in?
So I can start, and then so we early on decided to do this ourselves. We didn't really want a lot of contractors on site, because we'd had fingers burnt in previous deployments when contractors had wandered off either in the middle or the end of the program with all the expertise. So we tried to work out a plan where we did the majority of this work ourselves. And as a bonus of that, we had some of the resources and finances available to build a big team of clinical champions. We had between 30 to 40 nurses lined up to support this. And we all know how good nurses are at supporting people through challenging and moments of anxiety. So we were really lucky that we managed to build that team. We had digital nurses who kind of led them and supported them become champions. And then they did a lot of that touchy-feely bit with the people to help them through these changes. They understood the change that needed to go through very well themselves, so they could support others. And there were hiccups, you always do. You have a few people who miss the boat or don't understand it quite right and need more support, and we made that available.
Yeah, I did this. This was my first piece of work with the NHS, so it was all new to me.
Oh my gosh.
And I think the overriding thing from my perspective is personalisation of that change management plan. So you've got your overall view, but people are interested in caring for patients and doing a good job, and they really want to know how this is going to impact their day-to-day life and their ability to be able to deliver that service. So an element of personalisation really helped.
What a baptism of fire for you though, Richard. Your first
Yes.
kind of project. Another question from Tina saying about communication and engagement with user base, and kind of your comms approach. You know, you've mentioned Teams and, you know, these regular meetings, but were there kind of the other routes that you took, kind of maybe staff newsletters or anything like that?
We had, there's a daily dose that a lot of messages go out on, both clinical and non-clinical. We set up a stand right by Costa that we have in the hospital, so if people were coming, and it's right by the canteen as well. It's at the top of the escalator, so as people were coming up, coming out, we were engaging with them. We did briefing sessions in the lecture theatre. We went to, I think, every single type of group that you can imagine, being it a staff group within a division or all the consultants. We went to everyone and we'd have 5 or 10 minutes slot every week on their agendas for us to then go and brief them up on what was happening, where we needed support. And we found that worked really well. And we also did where we had our chief exec team brief, where he would address the whole of the trust. We would have sessions on that as well.
What about you, Richard or Tom?
The ditto, pretty much. You know, you can't underestimate the amount of engagement you need to do in communication. You tell them again, you tell them again, you tell them again. And we had a Medway launch event where we brought everybody in to tell them exactly what we're doing, so talk it through and get some really early engagement. Posters absolutely everywhere. I'm sure they were totally and utterly sick of hearing from us by the end of it.
Amazing. I think we'll probably have time for one more. I know that there's plenty more questions and we'll try and answer sort of many kind of when this is over, but we are already over time and I'm conscious of people. This is probably their precious lunchtime. So I think one final one that'd be good to end on is from Samantha, which is, could both trusts share what the benefits have been from kind of doing this deployment? I think it'd be quite a nice kind of roundup. So shall we start? Barnsley, you kicked us off. So Barnsley, would you like to kind of kick off about what have been the key benefits for you kind of doing it this way?
I'll start. So the key benefits, and I think we've said some of those. I mean, I think it's just about visibility and doing this in a collaborative way with the organisation. And people say, oh, these are collaboration tools. They're absolutely right. They do inspire collaboration. You know, the visibility was absolutely massive. So, you know, people could be involved as little or as much as they possibly wanted to, and it was there and available at their fingertips at any time. I think oversight of the whole thing was incredible. So, you know, we were clear what was going on at every and any time. There was no hiding it. I mean, what I love about Barnsley people is that they're incredibly honest. They'll tell you straight away if they don't like something. You know, there's no kind of that sort of hierarchical, you know, no one will tell anybody anything that's going on. We'll hide it under the floorboard stuff. They'll tell us straight away if they didn't like something. And this just helps support that approach. And I think it's really, really good that they had that capability, because we knew straight away whether there was a problem and how to deal with it.
I think Tom mentioned.
I think if I may just add to that from a Walsall point of view. Oh, sorry, Richard. You're correct.
Tom mentioned it earlier about ownership. So obviously, this was all done. We had this phrase for Barnsley by Barnsley. So that knowledge and those relationships that we built up through, you know, any go live period is stressful, and you know, so the relationships that we've built up there will just pay dividends when we're doing EDMS and EPMA. We've also retained those staff, and they've done things that they didn't think were possible. And I think specifically around the go live, we had 125 plus people come forward to support us at go live, to do testing, data quality validation, stuff like that. And I'm convinced that a lot of those people did it because they could just do it from home. And we didn't have them in a room. We just said, we'll let you know when we need you, and we just need you to be on Teams. You don't have to be here. You can be at home, you can be in your office, you can be wherever. And it took all that pressure off people of being in a room for 8 hours or whatever it was that we needed them for. So I think that flexibility opened it up and got us a lot more engagement that's you know, been retained over this period.
So if I can just add, I mean, I can reinforce all those from a Walsall point of view. I think just a couple of things I think we particularly felt was the clinical ownership. We had amazing support from our doctors, both when we were in a sort of practical sense, but also when we became virtual. So we continued all that clinical engagement and decision making right through. We had doctors on duty with us when we were working through the night at the weekend of cutover. We had always had a CCIO on site to support any clinical input that was required, and actively involved in the decision making, which I think was crucial through the whole period. And that enabled us to take the body of consultants with us, because I think that's always going to be a challenge in any digital transformation, and likewise with senior nursing and so on. So I think that part of it. And I think the other bit we maintained throughout the process was not doing it to the organisation. Our SRO was absolutely clear that if we took a decision not to go live because we were compromising patient safety, we would not have done so. And we believed that, the organisation believed that. And that took us right the way through, so that we were always in tandem. It wasn't something that just was a digital initiative. And I think that message had to go through over and over again. And people still believe that as we go through into other developments that we've been doing just this week.
Do you want to add anything, Mark? Or...
Very little, to be honest. I mean, everyone said it. I just really just want to reiterate what my colleagues have mentioned. It's the only way we can behave and be successful, and it's a partnership. And if you can build that partnership up, as Tom mentioned, is that partnership will last a long time, and it does stand you in good stead when you are moving to your next phase. We had it's the belief in the project team, and I think that is the one thing I will say. You've got to have that belief and be honest. And we did, and we have so many people now who want to be on our next journey. I have to turn them down.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much. I think we're going to have to wrap it up there. A couple of people have been asking about whether there'll be a recording available and the slides, and the answer is yes to the presentation. So a recording will be available sort of for the next couple of days, and I'm sure you guys wouldn't mind maybe sharing the slides if people want them. But I think we're unfortunately going to have to wrap it up there as our hour is up. It's absolutely flown by. Thank you very much to everyone who has tuned in. We had a great turnout today. Just to let you know, Digital Health's got a couple more webinars left in 2020, so please do head over to our events page to sign up for plenty more. And a huge thank you again to our speakers for their presentation, and thank you to everyone for listening. And that concludes today's webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.